Now we will move on to the methods of conservation of biodiversity. We know what are the threats for biodiversity loss. Now we will study about biodiversity conservation, because when we have an idea how we conserve our biodiversity, we can when we get this awareness, we'll try to protect our this important resource called biodiversity, and we can thrive very well. Conservation is the protection, preservation, management, or restoration of wildlife and natural resources. As we discussed, biodiversity is necessary for our existence as well as valuable in its own right. Where the current rate of biodiversity loss is 100 times higher than the expected rate, biodiversity and protection of our ecosystems is very, very important to all of us as individuals. It is our responsibility to pass on the same natural world we have and we enjoyed. Whatever we have enjoyed, whatever we have experienced, we have this is our responsibility to pass this resource to our future generations. So how we will do this is by these all these means. Okay, protection of habitat, prevention of species or overexploitation of species, reducing pollution, checking deforestation, promoting afforestation, restriction of exotic species, and most important is public awareness. When we create awareness in public, they will think twice before they disrupt any habitat or any species, I can say. There are two methods for conservation of biodiversity: in situ conservation, or it is called as on-site conservation. The second method is ex-situ conservation or off-site conservation. We'll see, in-situ conservation is the conservation of genetic resources through maintenance within the natural or even man-made ecosystems in which they occur. That means whatever the animals or the plants that are there, they will be protected or conserved within their natural environment where they live. This is called as in situ conservation. Whereas ex situ conservation is, this is conservation outside their habitats by perpetuating sample populations in genetic resources centers, zoos, botanical gardens, etc. That means whatever the plants or any animals, they are taken from their natural habitats and they are preserved or conserved in a protected area, that is called as ex situ conservation. Yeah. This is biodiversity. I have, as we said, we can conserve it through these means, two means: in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. In situ is within their living area. That means their living area is not disturbed, but the species or the animals or the plants are protected wherever they are present. So, protected areas like national parks, sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, all these come under in this category. Even sacred forests and sacred lakes or comes under in situ conservation. Whereas ex situ conservation is, that means the plants or animals are taken from their home and they are kept it in some other place and they are protected by creating favorable conditions to them. Example: seed banks, gene banks, long-term captive breeding, animal translocations, tissue culture banks, cryopreservation of gametes and embryos, botanical gardens, zoological gardens or zoos comes under ex situ conservation category. The first category in in-situ conservation is protected areas. Protected areas, these are the locations which receive protection because of their recognized natural, ecological, or cultural values. That means these protected areas are biogeographical areas where biological diversity along with natural and cultural resources are protected. That means not only the biological diversity, along with the biological diversity, whatever the plant and animals are there, along with them, the natural and cultural resources are also protected. That means that area is protected as it is and maintained and managed through legal and administrative measures. That means if anybody uh, tampers or anybody interferes or anybody try to um, uh, uh, tamper this protected area, they will be punished legally and by administrative measures. Okay, uh, and this protected area, it also includes marine protected areas. Even marine areas like oceans, seas, estuaries, or large lakes are also can be categorized under protected areas. According to 2017 WDPA, United Nations Environment Program um, statistics, uh, there are 209 thousand protected areas around the world. But now, by today, they are around 236,200 protected areas are around the world as on today, and they cover over 45 million kilometers square of the land, and plus oceans are covered. Um, I'm sorry, 45 million kilometers area with 25 million kilometers of oceans and 20 million kilometers square of our land being covered protected area. In India, there are 733 protected areas like 104 national parks, 537 wildlife sanctuaries, 26 community reserves, and 67 conservation reserves present. This is the um, India protected area statistic. There are 103 national parks, okay, 537 wildlife sanctuaries, 26 community reserves, and 67 conservation reserves or present. The, look at this picture. This is the picture that shows the protected areas like Kanchenjunga, Dudhwa, and Indravati, Tadoba National Park, Satpura National Park, Gindi National Park, Silent Valley National Park. All these are national parks that are protected areas in our India. In this national parks, the area is strictly reserved for the betterment of wildlife, only for the betterment of wildlife. Forestry, grazing, cultivation activities are not permitted. That means whatever there are so many people dependent on forests, like the tribal people. So in these national areas, protected areas or national parks, grazing is not allowed. That means these people, they take their cattle inside this national parks, and they cannot grazing is not allowed. Even they cannot go into the forest to collect the forest produce. Okay, so strictly this is not allowed inside the national park. Now, wildlife sanctuaries. Look at this picture. In India, there are told you 537 wildlife sanctuaries are present. Kolleru Lake is one wildlife sanctuary. Papikondalu is one life sanctuary. Um, Etur Nagaram in our very own state. Srisalem Wildlife Sanctuary. Pocharam Wildlife Sanctuary. Kaval Wildlife Sanctuary. All these things are like 537 protected areas in the form of wildlife sanctuaries are present in our India. Here, this protected area, which is reserved for the conservation of animals only for animals. Okay, there's if you take Sri Salem, that is tiger reserve, tiger, even Kawal tiger, Etur Nagaram for another animal, like like that. In Gujarat, um, there is one wildlife sanctuary that will um, uh, protect lions. Like that, there are several wildlife sanctuary. This is here the conservation of only animals is permitted in this area. Here, human activities are restricted and few um, activities are permitted. Controlled biotic interference is permitted, um, human activities like harvesting of timber, collecting minor forest products like soap nuts or imli or honey, etc. All these collection of minor forest products and private ownership rights are all also allowed as long as they do not interfere the well-being of the animals. And boundaries of sanctuaries are not well marked or well defined, and controlled biotic interference is permitted. Another very important and interesting uh, in situ conservation method is a biosphere reserve. Biosphere reserves are sites established by countries and are recognized under UNESCO's MAB program, that means Man and Biodiversity Biosphere program, to promote sustainable development based on local community efforts and sound science. You can turn this biosphere reserve, it can be defined as areas of terrestrial, these are a terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem, whether biosphere aquatic ecosystem or a terrestrial ecosystem can be defined as a biosphere when uh, uh, this ecosystems, they promote solution to reconcile the conservation of biodiversity with its sustainable use, and they're internationally recognized and nominated by national governments, and these biospheres reserves remain under uh, sovereign jurisdiction of the states where they are located. Wherever these biosphere reserves are there, their maintenance or their jurisdiction is remained under the states which they are present in. Now we will see the key features of the biosphere reserves. They are multi-purpose. You should remember these biosphere reserves are multi-purpose protected areas with boundaries. There is a confined boundaries are present. Okay? These boundaries are confined by legislation. In each biosphere reserve, there are three zones. If you look at this here, there is a core zone which is surrounded by buffer zone. These two are surrounded by a transition zone. Okay, here I have given this what are the activities or what are the activities permitted inside these zones is R stands for research, E stands for education, M stands for monitoring, T stands for tourism and recreation, and these huts, they represent settlements. If you look here in the core area, if you take, if it is a complete biosphere reserve, the core area, that means the central area, there is no activity, human activity is permitted, and only maintenance or monitoring activity is permitted. That means whatever the forest official, whoever the forest officials are there, they are only allowed inside the core area only for monitoring purpose. Whereas in buffer zone, The middle zone, educational activities, research activities, and tourism and recreation activities, and few extent settlement activities. That means settlement in the sense the whatever or the forest people like the tribal people who are dependent on the forest, they can have their homes here. That means establishments like small tandas, and you can they can establish small settlements, but big constructions are a no-no. Okay, so this is buffer area. Now coming to the transition area here, all the types of all the five um, uh, these things are permitted, like settlements, settlement of homes or settlement of small villages, tourism, and tourism is allowed, monitoring like education is allowed, research activities also allowed. Okay, so these are the three areas present in biosphere reserves. So this is the structure of the biosphere, and the important features of biosphere are, they are, or key features you can say, they are, these biosphere are multi-purpose protected areas with boundaries confined by legislation, and they help in restoration of degraded ecosystem. They help preserve genetic resources, species ecosystems, and habitats without disturbing its the habitats. Okay, and these biosphere, they maintain cultural, social, and ecologically sustainable economic developments in these in their vicinity. In India, there are presently there are 18 biosphere reserves. Nanda Devi, Nokrek, Manas, Dibru, Sundarbans in West Bengal, and Gulf of Mannar. It is here the Gulf of Mannar, and in our combined state, it is Seshachalam Hills, and now it is in Andhra Pradesh. Tirupati Seshachalam Hills is also a biosphere reserve. And if you take Gujarat, Kutch. Kutch is another biosphere reserve, and this is there is a cold desert um, in Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh area, and all these things. These are biosphere reserves. 18 biosphere reserves are present in India. The next important ex-situ conservation, in-situ conservation method is through sacred groves or sacred forests. A sacred grove or a sacred forest or any groves of trees that are special religious importance for a particular culture. That means it is an age-old tradition, and whereas a patch of fresh water or water bodies dedicated to local deities or local devatas, and none is allowed to cut plants or kill animals or any form of life there. So that's how they protect that particular forest or that particular area in the name of religion. Okay, for example, in our very own Telangana area, Sammakka Sarakka is a forest area where it is a sacred grove, we can say. Okay, and there are in India there are several sacred groves in combined. Andhra Pradesh, there are around 759 sacred groves or sacred forests are present. Here, what they will do is uh, they will not allow the local people, they will protect these areas in the name of their grama devata or deity, and they will not allow to cut any plants or kill any animals or any form of life, and this is protected as it is. Okay, so that's how this is the importance of sacred groves in conservation of biodiversity. Look at this. This is another important um, development happened. in our India. This is Bishnois. They devote and uh, they will not allow these chinkaras like these are one kind of deers. They'll play with these chinkaras and they will treat them as their the deities, and they will not allow to kill these animals. This is a black buck, which is protected for the Rajasthani area people. They they will not allow anyone to kill these animals. Because they treat them as very sacred. And this is a very well known movement that happened in 1970 in India. It is in Uttarakhand. It is called as Chipko movement or tree hugging movement, or you can call it as Chipko Andolan. It is a movement started in Uttarakhand, uh, where the local tribals they hugged the trees and they prevented the killing of the trees. Okay, to conserve the forests. So that's how the local people, they, in the name of religion, they used to protect some forests or any water body. Then it is called a sacred grove, or a sacred is considered as a sacred grove or a sacred water body, and they thus protect the biodiversity present over there.